March 2nd, 1945, a telegraph operator at Supreme Headquarters in Paris decoded a message from the front. 7 words appeared on the paper, then a question so sarcastic it made the staff officers gasp. "Have taken Trier with 2 divisions. Do you want me to give it back?" The message came from General George Patton. It was addressed to the Supreme Commander, Dwight Eisenhower. And it was mocking him, because just hours earlier Eisenhower had sent an urgent order. "Don't attack Trier. You'll need 4 divisions. It's impossible." But by the time that order arrived, Patton had already won. This is the story of the most audacious telegram in military history, and the impossible battle that made it possible. First, you'll discover why Germany's oldest city was considered unbreakable, a fortress surrounded by rivers, defended by thousands, protected by 2,000-year-old Roman engineering. Then you'll hear how Patton raced against time, not just fighting the Germans, but fighting his own headquarters, knowing that every hour of delay meant Eisenhower would shut him down and hand his fuel to Montgomery. And finally, you'll understand the midnight charge that shouldn't have worked. American tanks rushing through medieval streets, soldiers sprinting across an ancient bridge packed with explosives, one cut wire away from catastrophe. This isn't just about capturing a city. It's about the moment a general proved that speed and instinct could defeat caution and mathematics. The story begins in February 1945 with an army standing before a wall of death. The Siegfried Line wasn't a trench, it was a zone of obliteration. The Germans called it the Westwall. Miles deep, concrete bunkers sunk into hillsides, invisible until you were within killing range. Artillery positions that could annihilate entire companies, minefields that turned farmland into graveyards, and the dragon's teeth, thousands of concrete pyramids 4 feet tall, designed to rip the belly out of any tank foolish enough to approach. February 1945. The weather was barbaric. Freezing rain turned the ground into a swamp. Tanks sank to their axles. Trucks simply stopped. Soldiers stood in foxholes filled with icy water, their feet rotting inside their boots. Most generals looked at the Siegfried Line and calculated. They wanted air support, they wanted artillery stockpiles, they wanted overwhelming force. Patton looked at it and saw something else. He saw exhaustion. The German army was breaking, not on paper. On paper, they still had divisions, still had guns, but Patton knew that a defensive line is only as strong as the men manning it, and those men were 16-year-old boys and 50-year-old grandfathers, poorly fed, poorly led, waiting for the end. He called General Walton Walker, his bulldog course commander, short, angry, relentless. Patton pointed to the map, to a triangle of land between 2 rivers, the Saar and the Moselle. At the tip sat Trier, founded by Romans in 16 BC, Germany's oldest city, a symbol, a road junction, a prize. "I want it," Patton said. Walker studied the terrain, steep hills, dense forests, every approach covered by machine guns. He didn't ask if it was possible, he asked when they'd start. On February the 19th, the 10th Armoured Division, the Tigers, roared forward. Not a careful probe, a sledgehammer. Combat engineers ran through machine gun fire to blow gaps in the dragon's teeth. Infantry cleared pillboxes one by one, grenades through the firing slits, flamethrowers to burn out anyone who wouldn't surrender. For 3 days, it looked like failure. The mud was winning. And in Paris, at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower's staff watched the map with growing anxiety. Patton was getting bogged down. They began drafting orders to halt the operation. Montgomery needed supplies for his own Rhine crossing. If Patton stalled, his fuel would go north. Patton knew this. He wasn't just fighting Germans. He was fighting Allied politics. He drove to the front, stood in the freezing mud, and screamed at his tank commanders. "If you stop, you die. Keep moving." And then, on February the 24th, the line cracked. The 10th Armoured broke through. Suddenly, they were in open ground. The German rear collapsed. The Tigers began to run, east, toward Trier. By late February, they could see the city. You've just heard how Patton smashed through a line that was supposed to hold for months. If you're someone who wants to hear the stories that don't make it into the textbooks, the tactical decisions, the personality clashes, the moments that actually decided battles, then you're exactly who we make these videos for. Every week, we dig into the archives and uncover what really happened when the cameras weren't rolling. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now, back to Trier, because this is where Eisenhower tried to stop him. Trier was a fortress by geography alone, hills on three sides, the Moselle River cutting it off. The German High Command ordered it held to the last man. They flooded the approaches. They rigged every bridge with explosives. They hid anti-tank guns in the Roman ruins. At Allied headquarters, intelligence officers did the calculations. To take a fortified city in urban combat, doctrine required a 3-to-1 advantage, ideally 4-to-1. Patton had two divisions, the 10th Armoured and the 94th Infantry. The operations staff presented their case to Eisenhower. Patton's walking into a meat grinder. He'll get stuck fighting house to house, bypass Trier, let follow-up forces deal with it later. It was sensible, cautious, safe. Eisenhower agreed. A message was drafted, clear and direct. Bypass Trier, do not engage, wait for reinforcements. It was encoded, typed, given to a motorcycle courier, but messages in 1945 didn't move at the speed of thought. They moved at the speed of men on motorbikes navigating bombed-out roads. And whilst that message was making its slow journey from Paris to the front lines, George Patton was already moving. He'd sensed the hesitation from above. He knew an order to stop was coming, so he decided to make it irrelevant. He called Walker. "Take Trier," he said. "Do it tonight." The night of March 1st. You know what's remarkable about this moment? Most people learn that Patton took Trier. They don't learn that he did it knowing his own Supreme Commander had ordered him not to. But you're still here, which tells me you're someone who actually cares about understanding how these victories really happened. Not the sanitized version, but the insubordination, the gambles, the chaos. That's exactly why this channel exists. We're building a community that refuses to let the real stories get buried under myth. If that sounds like something you want to be part of, subscribe. Now, let me tell you about the midnight charge. The 10th Armoured Division sat on the hills overlooking Trier. Below them, the ancient city lay in darkness. The problem was simple and deadly: bridges. The Moselle River cut the city off completely. If the Germans blew the bridges, the tanks would be stranded. The infantry would be slaughtered trying to cross in rubber boats. There were two main bridges, the Kaiser Bridge and the Römerbrücke, the Roman bridge, built in 16 BC, nearly 2,000 years old. Roman legions had marched across it. Medieval knights had ridden across it. Napoleon had crossed it. And now American Sherman tanks were coming for it. The Germans knew its value. They packed the stone arches with tons of dynamite. An officer stood ready with the detonator. The American plan was beautifully simple and catastrophically dangerous. Rush the city in the dark, use speed to shock the defenders and capture the bridge before they could push the plunger. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Richardson led the charge. 0200 hours. The engines roared to life. No artillery preparation. That would warn the Germans. Just speed. The tanks smashed through roadblocks on the outskirts. They raced down winding roads into the valley. German sentries fired flares. Suddenly, the night was daylight. Machine gun fire erupted from the windows. Panzerfaust rockets streaked through the air. The lead tank took a hit, burst into flames. The column didn't stop. They pushed the burning wreck off the road and kept going. They reached the first bridge, the Kaiser Bridge. Just as the lead tank approached, boom! A massive explosion. The bridge collapsed into the river. The Germans had blown it. One chance left, the Roman bridge. Richardson screamed at his drivers, "Get to that bridge!" They navigated narrow medieval streets in total darkness. Maps were useless. They followed the river, turned a corner. There it was, intact. But the approach was covered by machine gun nests, and everyone knew the explosives were primed. This is the moment. Right here. This is where Patton's entire gamble comes down to one bridge, one sprint, one cut wire. If it blows, Patton fails. Eisenhower's warning is proven right. The Third Army gets stuck. Montgomery gets all the glory. But if they can reach it in time... A platoon of infantry jumped off the backs of the tanks. Led by a young lieutenant whose name was never recorded, they sprinted toward the bridge. Bullets sparked off the ancient Roman stones. Men fell, but they kept running. They reached the middle of the bridge. Every step they expected the ground to explode beneath them. Every breath could be their last. The explosion never came. Maybe the German commander hesitated. Maybe a stray bullet cut the wire. Maybe the detonator malfunctioned. Or maybe the speed of the American attack was simply too fast. The Germans so shocked to see enemy soldiers on the bridge that they panicked. The Americans reached the far side. They found the wires leading to the demolition charges. They cut them. They bayoneted the defenders in the bridge house. They fired a green flare. The bridge was secure. Within minutes, Sherman tanks were rumbling across stones laid down by Roman engineers 2,000 years earlier. The sound echoed off the valley walls, a roar that must have been terrifying for the German defenders. Once the tanks were inside the city proper, the defence collapsed. Germans surrendered in droves. By dawn on March the 2nd, Trier was secure. The American flag was raised over the Porta Nigra, the ancient Roman gate. Patton had done it. He'd captured a fortress city with 2 divisions. Later that morning, George Patton stood in his headquarters, smoking a cigar, listening to reports from Trier. An aide walked in, nervous, holding a piece of paper. "General, a message from Supreme Headquarters, from General Eisenhower." Patton took the paper, read it. It was the order, the one drafted the day before. "Bypass Trier. It will take 4 divisions to capture it." Patton read it again, started to chuckle, then to laugh, a loud, booming laugh. The bureaucracy was so slow and his army so fast that the orders were obsolete before they'd even arrived. He looked at his staff. "They think we can't do it. They think we need 4 divisions. He sat down at his desk, took a pencil. He could have sent a professional reply. Mission accomplished. Trier secured. But Patton was still stinging from the lack of trust. Annoyed that Eisenhower always prioritised Montgomery, he wanted to rub it in. He wrote, "Have taken Trier with 2 divisions." And then the punchline. "Do you want me to give it back?" He handed it to the radio operator. Send it directly to Ike." When the message arrived at Versailles, it caused a stir. Eisenhower carried the weight of the entire war on his shoulders. He was a serious man, but when he read Patton's telegram, even he couldn't help but smile. It was classic Patton. Arrogant, insubordinate, undeniably brilliant. And Eisenhower knew he couldn't punish a general for winning a major victory ahead of schedule and under budget. The capture of Trier opened the gateway to the Rhine. It accelerated the end of the war by weeks. Eisenhower reportedly folded the telegram and put it in his pocket. He didn't reply to the sarcastic question. He simply issued a new order. "Congratulations, keep moving." But the message sent a shockwave through Allied command. It silenced the critics. It proved that the Patton method, speed, violence, ignoring the rulebook, worked better than the cautious, methodical approach favoured by the British. For the soldiers of the Third Army, the telegram became legend. It was whispered in mess halls, shared in foxholes. "Did you hear what the old man told Ike?" It gave them pride, made them feel like they were part of an outlaw army, an army that could do the impossible. The story spread beyond the Third Army. Soldiers in other units heard it. Some didn't believe it. It was too perfect, too Hollywood. But it was real. The telegram exists in the archives. 7 words of military genius followed by one sarcastic question that captured everything about George S. Patton's character. The capture of Trier is often overshadowed by bigger battles, the Bulge, the Rhine crossings, the race to Berlin. But in many ways, it's the perfect distillation of Patton's genius. He understood something fundamental. In war, time is the only currency that matters. Waiting for 4 divisions would have given the Germans time to reinforce. It would have turned Trier into Stalingrad. By attacking now, with less, he achieved more. The British approach, Montgomery's approach, was to accumulate overwhelming force, then attack when defeat was mathematically impossible. It worked, but it was slow. Patton's approach was to attack when the enemy was weak, even if you were weaker. Find the moment of vulnerability and exploit it before the window closed. The risk was catastrophic failure. The reward was victories that accelerated the entire timeline of the war. And Patton understood the psychology of his own command structure. He knew Eisenhower was under constant pressure from Churchill to prioritise British operations. He knew that if he asked permission, he'd be told no, so he didn't ask. He presented Eisenhower with a fait accompli. It was insubordination. Technically, Patton had violated the chain of command by attacking after he knew an order to halt was coming. But it worked. And in war, success has a way of retroactively justifying risk. Let's go back to that bridge one more time, because this is where the entire battle could have ended in disaster. Those American soldiers sprinting across the Roman bridge had no idea if it would explode beneath them. They had no idea if the Germans had already pushed the detonator and they were simply in the final seconds before detonation. Every footfall on those ancient stones was an act of faith. One of the soldiers later said he remembers thinking about the Romans who'd built it. He wondered if they'd ever imagined that 2,000 years later, men would be running across their bridge, desperately trying to cut wires connected to enough explosives to vaporize stone that had survived 2 millennia. When they reached the far side and cut the wires, there was no celebration. They were too busy fighting. The realization that they'd just saved the bridge and possibly saved the entire operation came later. That night, after Trier was secure, some of the engineers went back to examine the demolition charges. They found tons of explosives, professionally placed, ready to go. The detonator hadn't malfunctioned. The wires hadn't been cut by a stray bullet. The German officer assigned to blow the bridge had simply been too slow. The American attack had been so fast, so unexpected, that by the time he realized what was happening, enemy soldiers were already on the bridge. He'd hesitated. And that hesitation saved the bridge. Speed had defeated preparation. Do you want me to give it back? 7 words that captured everything about the relationship between warriors and planners. The planners calculated, they measured, they determined what was impossible. The warriors went and did it anyway. Patton's telegram wasn't just sarcasm, it was a reminder that whilst headquarters was debating doctrine, soldiers were making the doctrine obsolete. The capture of Trier saved lives. Every week the war continued meant more deaths. By accelerating the timeline, Patton shortened the war. The soldiers who would have died in a prolonged siege of Trier went home instead. That's the part that gets forgotten in the legend of the telegram. Behind the arrogance and the insubordination was a general who understood that speed saves lives. The telegram sits in the National Archives now, a piece of paper that made history. It remains one of the greatest lines in military history, not because it was clever, but because it was earned. Patton didn't just capture a city that day, he captured the essence of victory, the willingness to risk everything when the moment demands it. If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously, videos like this take weeks to research and produce, and they only exist because people like you actually watch them all the way through. If you want more stories like this, the telegrams, the insubordination, the moments that decided history, then subscribe. And if you really want to help these stories reach more people, share this video. These men risked everything. The least we can do is remember them properly. I'll see you in the next one.